Hello, hello. If you are watching right now, this is the Speaker's Lounge. I do this once a month, every first Monday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. And I do this because I want to be speaking to other people who are genuinely interested in helping you become a better communicator. And this way, you get new tools, you get to grow more, and I have a lot of value that I can add in your life. But I think it's even better if we can get more voices in the room. So today we have Jodie Goldberg, who I have to say is one of my favorite people. I mean, we've known each other for about a year now, but last year we both took a stand-up comedy class. It was all women. And I walk in and she was one of the first people that I met, and she had this big smile. She was full of energy. And I was like, oh yeah, I am sitting next to this person. So Jodie, thank you for being here to talk about how to start meetings and presentations, because the beginnings matter.
Yes. Oh my gosh. The beginning absolutely matters. And I'm telling you, if it wasn't for the connection that you and I made from the very beginning of our comedy class, I wouldn't have been as excited to come back because I saw a familiar face. You and I, we developed such fun rapport, and we already started sharing some of our silly jokes that were super unformed. So I feel so lucky that you were the first face that I met, because I think that also signifies how we begin with just intentionality, right? Even that was not planned. It was amazing.
Oh, it was, yeah, because there's people in this world that give you and feed you energy and you're one of those people. Like I could just sit and talk to you for hours and hours and hours because you're just so positive, and I adore you. So I'm a little bit sad that you're moving away from NYC, but I will keep that on. That's not a part of this show. Okay. So I want to hear a little bit about where you got to this place of look, people are not really starting their meetings intentionally. They're not starting presentations intentionally. What was that intersection that you came to when you realized we can do better? And Felipe, I see you. Hello. Thank you for being here. And yeah, if you're watching, if you have any questions for us, please feel free to put those in the chat. So Jodie, I hand this baton over to you.
Amazing. Well, Meridith, you are one of my favorite people as well. And I'm so honored to be a speaker in your Speaker's Lounge. So thanks again for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm Jodie Goldberg. I work full-time in the nonprofit sector in philanthropy. But on the side, I do some consulting work. And that's sort of how the emergence of some of this beginnings work came about. A few years back, I was facilitating a meeting of mid-level managers. And we had done this exercise. It was like the middle of the day. And we invited each person to take a large sheet of paper and write down at the top of that sheet of paper a question that they would like to mine from others in the group. And of this group of 20 different leaders, mid-level managers, about 5, okay, like a fourth of them, all wrote a question that was pretty much the same. It was like, I'm planning a gathering, a meeting, a board retreat, and I need an icebreaker. So all of you wonderful people, come and help me. And that's when I realized we have a problem, right? An icebreaker is not actually a strategy for how to begin with deep intentionality. It's a modality of learning. Right. And people were asking each other for questions without actually knowing the fundamental core of what group they were facilitating, right? Nothing about, so that's when I really realized we've got to do better, right? There's so much more we can do.
Yeah.
And I began to look, I was then, that thing when you start to see one thing, there's an actual name, a term for it, but when you begin to see something and then all of a sudden you see it everywhere.
Yes. Yes.
I was going back to my own meetings and conferences and retreats and realizing that people were starting these with icebreakers that not only didn't create intentional connection between participants, but the tone of the icebreaker didn't actually match the content. And so I realized we've got to do better. We've got to do more.
No, I really appreciate what you're saying here, because it's about the icebreaker shouldn't be on its own. It should come around full circle. What we've learned about each other, the things that are new, the empathy that it has created needs to be tied back throughout the learnings of the day, or there needs to be some sort of a debrief. So I'm curious if you can talk to me a little bit about what are some of these different, because I know you've reframed the word icebreakers. So I want to hear about how you've reframed them to fit the different needs and intentionalities of these individual meetings. Can you talk into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, even before I get there, I'll talk about some of the factors, right? When we're thinking about an icebreaker, right, we can't just think about like, oh, what's your favorite ice cream flavor? And think that that's actually going to build belonging or buy-in in any sort of way, right? Exactly.
What do you mean?
I know, right? Just because you love mint chocolate chip, Meredith.
I knew you were going to say mint chocolate chip. I knew you were going to say mint chocolate chip.
Actually tell me about you or your soul.
I know.
Give me an understanding about who you are as a person. And it certainly won't connect you to the content of the meeting, right? Like that's not going to fly. So I've been doing some research, and in some of that research, I've been thinking that there are at least 3 or 4 factors that we want to think about when thinking about how to start with deep intentionality. And then I can talk to some of the icebreakers the types that I've been creating.
I love it. Let's do it.
So a few of those things are size. Like, what's the size of the group that you're facilitating, right? Mm-hmm. Like the icebreaker or how you're going to begin is going to change based on if it's a small, intimate group or it's a large group of, 50 or 100 people, right? What's the familiarity of the group, right? Like, how well does this group know each other? Is this group coming together for the very first time and you're leading that meeting? Or is this a group that's been together for 7, 8, 9 years and you're looking to take them to the next level? Right. It's also questions of how does this group, what are some of the factors, right, that are happening both internally within the organization, right? You might be working with a group that's been working together and they just made this major announcement that the organization is expanding. And all of a sudden, right, all kinds of emotions or fears might come up for people. So how do we take notice of what's the internal factors and some of the external factors? Like the Olympics is happening in the world, or there's a tornado that just hit, right, that's impacting our local community. So how do some of those internal and external factors match up with how people are feeling and what you might want to bring to the space? So those are some of the factors. Any others you would add, Meredith? Because I know that you're such an amazing presentation guru and you're all about buy-in.
Yeah, well, I would say yes, and to everything you've already said, and being also just really clear about who your audience is and not make assumptions about who's in the room.
Beautiful.
Especially if there are people that you're like, oh, I've spoken to groups like this before. I always say to my clients, each audience is unique and has a unique set of wants and needs, and it's our job to help give them those, give them the things that they don't know they need, and then also help them get their wants met as well. And so what I'm hearing you say is yes, and to that, and all of these other things, and how that icebreaker can really help bring that group closer together so that there's more of a collective space for learning. It's like you're building that trust in a more intentional way so that people can actually leave. My whole objective is I want people to leave remembering the content, having somehow integrated some of the content. And so you're the first, what I'm hearing you say is like, let's start off by doing something that's integrative, intentionally integrative, and then continue that path. So do you want to talk more into that now? And and I also have a hard time with the word icebreaker.
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like it's the same thing when we're going to do team building. There's a cringe effect to it now because it feels like it's forced activity. So I'm curious because you have done, and I know you're going to speak into this because I have already asked you about it, but tell us how you're reframing that for people so it doesn't feel like forced upon activity that has a cringe effect.
Yeah, no, I think so well said, right? And language shifts and shapes a culture, right? So then when we can actually shift away from that cringe icebreaker term and actually get more specific about what we mean,
Yes.
Then it can feel accessible. It can feel tangible, and we can feel like we can take it and adapt it back. So I've been trying to think about, how do we reframe this term from something like ugh to something that we want to think about and want to remember. So I've come up with many different types of icebreakers, and I'll share a few with you today. The first is dice breaker, right? When you think about a pair of dice and when you roll a pair of dice, right, it's unexpected, right? What number you're going to land on, you don't know.
Yeah.
So these are questions that invite us to think about things that are new or unexpected about people, just as dice are sort of, you don't know what you're going to roll, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are really questions that when a group is first meeting each other, like, you want to bring in some of those dice breaker questions. They're things like, when was the last time you laughed? And what was it about? Right? Like something that gives you a little bit of a sense of who they are, like a little bit of a palate taste, right? And also gives you something new, exciting. So the second one I've been thinking a lot about is slice breaker, right? When you slice something open and the exterior, right, looks super different than the interior. And I'm thinking like about a lemon.
Okay.
For example, okay? You've got like the hard exterior and the super sort of seeds and juice in the middle, right? So slice breakers invite us to share or to process challenging or any sort of feelings or emotions, right? Recognizing that our exteriors as people are really different than what we're holding on the inside. So these are really questions like, how are you feeling right now? Or what's a color that represents your mood? Or what's a kitchen utensil that might represent how you're feeling right now, right? We could go super simple, or we could go super creative.
What's yours? I'm going to ask you that question right now, Jodie. What's your kitchen utensil right now?
That's so brilliant, Meridith. For me, it's the blender. Okay. Like, I have just got so much going on and it's all blending together. But then when you turn the blender off, you get that moment of calm. Right. So I'm oscillating between moments of calm and moments of crazy. And that's the beauty of a blender, right? Is you get to see it in its stillest form and in its most rich and crazy and gooey form. How about you, Meridith? What about you?
Oh my goodness. I don't know if I'm going to be able to go as deep as you right now. The first thing that popped in my head, which is more of, it's not necessarily, okay, it's a whisk. It's like a whisk. Ooh. But I don't really have, it's just, that was the first thing that popped in my head.
That's beautiful.
I was also going to say coffee pot, but then I was like, that's not a utensil.
No, but you know what? That is a kitchen device.
It is a device.
Honestly, Meridith, the whisk I feel like is amazing because you're constantly whisking things up, right? Like,
I'm constantly whisking things up. I am. I have too many ideas and not enough places to put them.
Yes. Absolutely. But that's the beauty of you, right?
Yes, like, it's so true.
I'm sure you have so many whisks.
I love this. This is such a great, we just did an example of that activity and the things that we found about each other in that activity. Okay, you had a third one. Tell me the third one.
Yeah, great. I'll tell you one more, and then I've got even more that I'd love for you to contact me and learn more about. But the third one that I've been thinking a lot about is called spice breakers, right? Spices.
Yes.
Depth,
yes, right? They do.
And these are questions that help you really understand someone's values, right? And maybe how somebody makes decisions. And I think of spice breaker questions as icebreaker questions that I would bring in when a group already knows each other pretty well, right? You've done the dice breaker work, right? Yeah. Like, you already have spent significant time, but this is a way for groups to go deeper. Just like spices help food go deep and maintain a deeper, richer flavor. So questions like this might be, what's a ritual, or what's an example of a ritual that grounds you? And that just can give you a little bit of a sense of somebody's values and what is it that they value? How do you spend your time? Right. That gives you a little bit of sense of what somebody values in their own life and in their world. And the questions, those are some of the more surface spice levels, but they can go even deeper. And I think part of how do you know what to use when? I think it's thinking about some of those factors that we talked about, right? Like,
yeah. Yeah, I'm curious about, like, let's just say it's a high stakes meeting, right? Where the intensity is high. And let's just say somebody says, we don't have time for one of these. But
So,
yeah, I'm sure you've come across that. Like, what would you say in response to that?
so this is I'm so glad you raised this because this is what I'm seeing all the time. I was just working with a group that was building community and was doing community building work in their meetings, and then realized that the community building was just taking so much time. So instead of finding a way to rethink it, they just X'd it out. And they said no more community building, right? Which is
Mm,
counterintuitive to the culture that they're trying to create with other people. So it's a great question, Meridith. And I've actually created something called concise breakers, which
okay.
are icebreakers that can be done in a really, really short amount of time, that invite you to share feelings or emotions in just a few words, right? So it might be, Meridith, could you give me 3 words for how you would like to feel by the end of this meeting?
Yeah. No, I think that's brilliant. Because Jody, I feel like what's happening too right now, like there's a lot of conversations about mental health. There's a lot of conversations about belonging and inclusion. And I feel, quite frankly, it's about how do we cultivate spaces to help people feel brave and safe enough to speak their truth in these spaces, because I've been in those meetings before where I had an idea, but I was too afraid to share it because of the company that I was holding and because there wasn't enough of that trust there. And trust is not something that you build in one meeting. And you can have been a part of a team for several years, and still trust is something that can fall away and then return, if you put intentionality behind it. And then I also this also feeds into how we feel and work, and if all sorts of different things. So if you have more to speak into that, I would love to hear.
Yeah, no, I think your point is so well taken, which is, right, this isn't just nice, right? This actually, this is important. This is extremely important work, and there's research to back it up. There's research from the World Health Organization, which talks about that if people are given a voice in the
Mhm.
beginning of a meeting, they are more likely to speak up later in the meeting and feel like there's a sense of psychological safety on their team. Right now, psychological safety and belonging are different things.
Yep.
But psychological safety is one factor that can help lead to belonging. So, right, this isn't just nice work. This is important work. And this is how we see people from the very, very, very beginning. And that's why the beginnings are just so critical, right?
Yeah.
And the content that we get to in any meeting, right? We can't actually do that content well or be productive without feeling like our voices mean something. And this is one way to help people feel seen, heard, and valued and feel more psychologically safe in a space.
I love it. I absolutely love that this is the work that you've been called to do, and I feel that, uh, if people wanna get in first of all, if people wanna get in touch with Jody, I'm gonna go ahead. I know that you're in a lot of transition right now. Is that true?
That is, we're in this
That's
great moment of
You're the
transition.
blender. You're the blender, baby.
Yes, exactly.
So right now, if you want to, you can, yes, follow Jody here on LinkedIn. You can also find her on Instagram at Jody Gloria. And I would definitely advise you, especially if you have a team, if you're in a leadership position, if you're managing a team, please get in touch with Jody. See if you can pick her brain a little bit about how she can help you create better meetings and really be more intentional with those beginnings, because even if it's a meeting or if it's a presentation, it is an experience, and everything should be intentionally tied together. And I know sometimes that can feel hard for people, especially in these last minute situations or these high stakes situations, but that, like you mentioned, the psychological safety is so important, the inclusion piece, and yes, the belonging piece, because people need to feel that they can show up and use their voice in any given circumstance. I mean, there's a reason why they're at that table.
Exactly. And I'll say we are living in a world, in a post-COVID world, right? Where we are feeling more increasingly isolated, and people are more spread out, right? We are living in a world fraught with all kinds of tension. And so this is such a small way that you can help bring people together on your team, help people hear their own voices and feel feel important and part of the team. Like, this is the work. This is not just the work of meetings. This is not just the work of presentations. This is the work of life. And how do we find intentional ways to bring that in is a big question that I'm thinking about. And I'd love the opportunity to think with you, because this is such deep, rich, collaborative work. And the more brains we're putting towards this, really the better, right, Meridith?
Yes, and to that, more brains are better than one, I always say.
Always.
For sure.
Always.
Yeah.
I know.
Oh my goodness. And Jodie, we need to get together so that we can come up with another stand-up set.
I was about to say, yes, I know. I think yes. A plug for that, right? If you want to learn about yourself in ways that you never thought possible, go do some stand-up, right?
Oh, I tell my clients, like, go take a stand-up. It's a different muscle, right? Because I often hear people ask me, how do I incorporate more humor into my presentations? Well, there's multiple different ways you can incorporate humor, but if you are going to incorporate jokes, right? Those need to be tested, and they need to be tested in front of an audience. Don't just get up and do a joke for the very first time in front of an audience. Test that thing out. And then there's the improvisational, the natural, innate humor that comes from that place of truth. And just because we are human, there are things that we do that are just innately humorous. And so how can we elevate that and bring out the best in your own already inherent humor as well? So there's these different ways that people enter in. And I also feel like stand-up is a really wonderful form for any speaker to study, because speaking of beginnings, Jodie, is that the way that some of these stand-up comedians begin their sets is incredible. They've got the audience in the palm of their hands.
Well, right. That's right. And I'm sure you're going to have more statistics on this, but I'm sure you can tell whether you're connecting with somebody within the first 5 to 10 seconds, right? Like,
oh, good Lord, you can feel it.
Right. Those are such critical moments.
Yeah.
And if you lose that, right, then you've not only lost the audience, but you've lost them from contributing to the content that you'd like them to, right? Like, it's so true.
Yep. 100%. All right. Well, if anyone has any questions for myself or for Jodie, now is the time to ask them. If not, feel free, please, again, to follow Jodie here on LinkedIn. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, you can find her on Instagram at Jodie Gloria. And Jodie, I cannot wait to see how you are going to go forth and change the way that meetings are done, because the work you're doing is very important. The way we communicate is so incredibly important, and how we lift each other up is what is going to change tomorrow. So thank you.
So well said, Meridith. Thank you again to you for having me on the Speakers Lounge, and to all of you out there, wishing you all the best and looking forward